to fit. Should I stop talking?
Keep on going. We're good.
Okay. So like, I'm trying to think of what questions. Yeah. So I'm gonna leave you with that appreciative inquiry, okay? Because I think that could actually help you come up with the types of questions that will open up this space. So like for instance, I was in Missoula, Montana, and we were there with a whole bunch of different faith communities. And we did an evening of appreciative inquiry. We wanted to give them an experience of it. So I facilitated a table. Fred is the one in our group who's very my sense is involved in this from the beginning. So he designs the question, and one of the questions we asked was, okay, so what skills do you bring to the community, right? What skills and strengths does your community bring to the table, right? Every person answered that question. Well, we do this really well, we do that really well, I do this really well. And we started from that, right? So you had the Episcopalians, you had the Methodists, and you had the Catholics, and you had the Jewish person, you had the spiritual but not religious personality, you had a mix. And so we put all that on the table. Because now they have an idea what people are good at, so when they're going to collaborate, they've got to, you and I need to talk because I'm not so great at that. Can we collaborate together, right? So it's an appreciative, it's a question, but it comes from a place of appreciation of what are you bringing? What's the, so looking at our, it's too late, I'm tired, so I don't think I could interpret it for what could we have asked the artist, right? It could have been something along the lines of, so what did you feel your story brought to the table, or what did you feel your process brought to, we've got this narrative, right? And what did you feel having to do this piece? What did it bring? Right? Which is, it opens it up very differently than, okay, what was your process as an artist? Could tell us what your difficulties were, what were your challenges? Yeah,
what did your process bring to the conversation?
Yeah. Because our scope was, here's a story, and we're going to look at it kind of in terms of how media deals with this stuff. So your piece, it automatically assumes it's vital. So what did your process bring to this conversation that we're having on this topic? I feel like that's harder.
It's a much harder question, which is good.
You have to think about it. So this is why you give the questions ahead of time.
Prompt.
Saying, hey, give some thought to this.
But dress rehearsal ahead of time, not early process ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't give them an artist question about the product mid-process. They'll go to hell. They'll be like, oh my god, everything's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's interesting because I feel like with the 4 p.m. show, we were able to be more open because I think the audience was more willing to discuss. And the 8 p.m. show, it felt really constrained, and I don't know why.
Our show?
Yeah.
I think people just didn't quite know what to say. It was maybe it sounds like it was a different crowd.
Yeah.
And probably it was the combination of it being a different crowd and not having the conversation be necessarily accessible to people who weren't artists.
Actually, so I think the difference, I haven't heard, is it Seisha? I haven't heard Seisha's story. But from what you've said, to me the difference feels like I told a story about principles. It wasn't specific to Sikhi or being British Columbian or being female or being a certain age, right?
Which hers were
all those. Specific.
Okay, and so mine wasn't. Mine was this idea of values and beliefs and tools and so every person in that room could relate because they could insert themselves into that story. And Seisha's story, because it's specific, it's a different type of story. Not everyone can insert themselves because they may not be able to relate to the pieces that are given.
That's an interesting thing for me because I think everyone could insert themselves into a similar experience, but not that narrative.
Right.
And I think it's harder to speak to an experience that you understand but can't have a specific relationship to, versus something where it's a more universal thing and you go, I can be in that, I can be in that.
Yes.
You know?
And I wonder if people had the same feeling that you had of not wanting to hijack her narrative. Of when you end up talking about these things like, oh yes, I have conflict with my parents, because that was a main tenet of her story, which, yes, the conflict with her parents was because of her identity, but I think that everyone has experienced conflict with their parents, of their parents not understanding who they are. But
well, and at some point your parents don't see your identity.
Right,
Yes,
right,
yes.
because they've known you for so long. And I wonder if, and I don't know if this is true, but I wonder if that's part of the reason people had a hard time talking about it, because they didn't want to feel like they were hijacking.
I don't know if that's true, because it's like the questions, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the questions just weren't really directed in that way.
Yeah.
Like the questions weren't, what did you take from her story? Or how did you relate to what you saw? The questions were, what did you see?
Right.
It was more of an art critique
Okay.
rather than like an analysis of like how you experienced the story that was being presented to you.
Right.
If that makes sense, it was less specific and it was more like a general kind of wash. So I think people have a hard time with generalities
Right.
sometimes.
Yeah. So
Well-
that's our role as facilitators then, is being
But
super.
also the frame of this is possibly media versus this is community work.
Yes.
Yeah.
That frame alone will change the entire scope of what you see and what you experience.
Because the goal wasn't, can the audience relate to the story? The
Not
goal was
necessarily,
the exploration of a story being told through the lens of the media, and so to different objectives.
Yeah.
Objective becomes very clear.
Yeah.
You guys should do some objective work.
Yeah.
Hooray.
The other piece, so I'm thinking back
Well,
to
yes,
our,
it's Stanislaus,
our
yeah.
reconciliation circle,
Yeah.
right? We started with the story of the Aboriginal people, right?
Yeah.
But yet they deliberately, that is how Reconciliation Canada does it. They deliberately have a model that says there's room for everyone, and so there's no way to hijack that story because they're saying it's a universal story.
Yeah.
So what's your story,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
That's
that's
what
very
made that
true.
morning so powerful.
Yeah.
Every person in that room had a right to tell their story at the table, and they were not muzzled because saying, well, you're not Indigenous, be quiet.
Right.
That wasn't their take at all.
Yeah.
That's what made that powerful.
Yeah.
They started with their story, but were equally curious about everyone else's issues.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting because at the first one, or maybe I think it was the first one, we went around and did the traditional greeting of First Nations cultures in Canada. Of you say everything.
This is who I am, this is where I'm
Yeah.
from, this is who my parents are, this is how I got here, this is some notable things in my life, this is that thing I forgot about, oh there's some ancestors, oh this other little story,
Yeah.
that thing, yeah.
Yeah, and that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, we were sort of sectioned off into groups of like 5 or 7 or something, so that it was a bit easier time wise. But that happened, and I think that.
And each person got that opportunity, and they could say it through their own lens, however far they wanted to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those that wanted it deeper, because that was their cultural experience, did that, and those that didn't.
Yeah.
But that's Reconciliation Canada's model, is they opened, and they say it, we lead with the story of the Aboriginal people. However, we feel that this is one story, like, not that they phrase it that way, but it's like, and then it's like, it's to, how do we tell the Canadian story? And that means all of us, and so we all all have room to tell. And they created empathy and understanding and relatability to the Indigenous experience. Am I wrong on that?
Absolutely not. You're absolutely correct.
That's what you guys
Yeah.
walked away with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And empathy and understanding for
Everybody in
for a
that
very
room, yes.
large.
For the lived
large-
experience.
Yes. And the fascinating thing was that there were maybe 4 Aboriginal people in that room. And while the discussion was centered on the issues that face that community, they were framed as issues that face humans and issues that face Canadians.
Yes.
And the very different people that were at that workshop or that were in the audience for a performance made it meaningful because everyone had a very different lived experience and everyone's experience was given credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even their content material, they talked about what happened with Aboriginal people, but they talked about Sikhs, and they talked about the Japanese, and they talked about the Chinese. Like, they were like, the story isn't unique. Do you know what I mean? Like, here's what happened to the Sikhs with Kamagata Maru. Here's what happened with the Chinese with the head tax. Here's what happened to the Japanese during internment. And you found, you know, like, they just continue with it. And that is a deliberate act on their part that the premise is that we're all interwoven together, so they come with that. They don't come with the, hi, I'm Indigenous, this is my pain, and you can't possibly probably relate to it because really, you didn't have this happen to them. They instead say, hi, I'm Indigenous, and you can totally relate because I think our experiences are human experiences.
Yeah.
And so you've got people there who are children of immigrants who've left war-torn countries, and they could very well relate. And told their own stories from the previous country of genocide and murder and extrajudicial killings, etc. Like, there were people in that room that very much related to it. Oh yeah, no, we get this. Mm-hmm. We've lived it now, right? There were those that got it from an abusive family and was like, oh yeah, I get that part because that's my world, right?
Well, intergenerational trauma is not one experience. It's happened all over the world for a very long time.
It was, so I thought it was a transformative day.
Yeah.
Because I saw you guys in the morning and I watched you guys walk out at the end, and you were not the same people that walked in that morning.
Yeah.
There was a TR report this morning.
What's TR?
Truth and Reconciliation.
Oh, okay.
There's a TR report
TRC.
this morning. Sure.
Yes.
No, I have problems with them anyways, but...
Did you just say Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
No,
Isn't that what you
Truth
said?
and Reconciliation.
Sorry, okay.
I have problems with
With the commission?
Oh, well, with the commission, but also there have been massive access to information refusals around residential school records during all of this.
By the government, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I agree, and that all needs to change. I agree.
Yeah, well, you can't have truth and reconciliation without the truth.
Correct. Correct.
Like, that's very simple.
Dang it, words.
I found them powerful. The events.
I think the model and the events and a lot of things, a lot of the work for individuals and small groups, fantastic. I think on a national level it's a failure. But I think on a small, localized basis it's very good.
I think it's a good start, and the work didn't finish. And I think if people think that was the end of it...
if we didn't have a new government, it would have been the end of it.
Yes, I 100% agree with you.
But now we can continue the work.
Yes. Yeah. We've got 4 years to kind of solidify a few things because...
We've got a couple hundred years.
I'm just thinking in a short-term political, because I have no idea what's happening in 4 years, right? But I just to open doors, solidify, this is a good window of opportunity. Because I didn't think the work was done at all. I felt it was just starting.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking back on that day now, it feels like this process is an extension of that conversation.
Yes. That's exactly what I felt. When I watched you do what you were doing, I felt it was rooted in that morning.
Yeah.
Keep it up, man.
Trying. Gonna make it happen. Yeah.
I got you back.
Yeah.
I think everyone here probably does.
I loved your courage, by the way, that day. And when you shared it, and shut me up if I'm not allowed to tell this.
Go for it. I know what you're going to tell us. So.
Well, you commented, so Lily had met, there were young Sikhs who wore turbans like myself, and you said, wow, like I expected you to have accents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And to be able to share that, like that's how safe the room felt by the end of the day. And to be able to say that was one of my preconceived ideas, and it was like, okay, that's not, you guys are clearly born here.
Yeah.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, and just realizing that I had a very strong preconceived notion that was totally wrong. And I still, like, there's a song from Avenue Q that's everyone's a little bit racist sometimes.
Right.
Which is totally true, but it goes on to say it doesn't mean you're committing hate crimes.
Right, true.
In that we all, like, racism can stand in for any of those isms, is that you have preconceived notions about everybody.
Yes.
And they're usually wrong. I would say 9 times out of 10 they're wrong. And unfortunately, the 1 time out of 10 is what creates that idea. But there's something about the process of seeing others as human and recognizing and I think that's something that you said, was that the human in me recognizes the human in you and wants to celebrate that. And I remember walking around SFE Woodwards and the downtown east side after that day and trying to make eye contact with people, and how hard that was for myself and for the other person, of being like, I'm trying to connect with you, but it's so not the social norm, and I'm also uncomfortable doing it at the same time, and that struggle was very apparent in a way that I hadn't thought about before. And I wonder if there's a way with this process to encourage people to do that.
So I learned to make great eye contact after I spent, in Vancouver, the Kundalini Yoga community does a White Tantric day, and it's between 6 to 8 hours of meditating. And that particular day, every meditation, they're 31 minutes or 61 minutes, was eye gazing. And it was eye gazing, so you there was a mudra, you held your hands a certain way or sat a certain way, or not, depending on what it was. And 6 to 8 hours of eye gazing. Any eye contact issues I ever had, they got burnt away. I kid you not. I walked out of there and I go back to work, and I work as a police dispatcher, so with police officers, and people could not meet my eyes. Cops who were coming down, these were not rookies, these were people who'd been around for quite a while, and we're just walking by, and I'm, smile and eye contact, and the avoid. And I was like, oh, isn't that fascinating? Great workshop. But so eye gazing, the exercise of it for a prolonged period of time. It disappeared. It took away whatever, it burnt off whatever insecurities I had.
It's amazing the emotional journey you can go doing that. Like I've spent hours alone in non-verbal states with people. Yeah. And you go through some highs and lows and lefts and rights, and they happen. Yes. And by simply doing this.
Yes, I had one. So she was from Alberta. She was my partner for the day. So you have one partner for the day, and so one. I think I've done 3 or 4 of them, and on one of them, she and I were partnered up. And towards the end of the day, her face is changing. Her eyes and the color of her eyes and the shape of her eyes stays the same, but she's changing. I mean, I saw someone with you think of a male and the face paint from Vietnam, a war, and I think she was a blonde, if memory serves me correctly. So her hair changed color, she changed genders and ethnicities, etc. I'm just sitting. So I was going, wow, okay, I'm in this. I'm breaking eye contact. You're blinking and all of that, but it was unbelievable. And so afterwards, so we have our breaks. You have about 10-15 minutes between each set. And so she went, oh my God, your face was changing. I said, oh my God, so much more. And she was like, you were blonde and blue-eyed. My eye color apparently changed, but the shape of my eyes never did. And so I was Celtic, I was Egyptian, I was, all kinds of male, female. I can't remember if she said male, but it was just, she was for sure. Because I shared with her, I was like, this is what I saw. And they were brief little flashes, because then it'd go back to her, right? A brief flash of something. And both of us had that moment at that time that we were someone else. We were, but yet the same person, And so I didn't know if these were past life kind of, who we were, wherever we were, but it was unbelievable. The two of us both had the same experience in that meditation. So it's just, this is what I mean. You dive into this and you never quite know. And no drugs, no alcohol, no nothing, right? We were eating vegetarian food for lunch and all the wholesome stuff so that we have the energy, for the rest of the day. And we'd been sitting in meditation, with 50-minute breaks between each set. And we were heading towards the end of our day. And I remember stopping and writing the notes down. So we each did our notes and that, and then we shared what we were going through. I wonder if I can find that paper that I wrote it down on. But yeah. So maybe that's something to think of in eye contact.
Simple contacts.
Mm-hmm.
Have I told you about Claire Love Wilson? She's a friend of mine that if you guys continue on this work, you should speak with. She's incredibly good at critical analysis of her own preconceptions. She spends her day doing academic work on the way she sees other people in a very honest and loving way. And so, she'll like have an interaction with her younger brother and then think about it for a while and actually fully process it at an academic level with critical thought. And she does that to like virtually everyone she meets. And she's loving and generous.
Yeah.
And likes art.
So what is her name?
Claire Love Wilson. She's a musician, performer, director, sort of, I guess. Yeah. She's lovely.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing...
Is this her?
Funny skinny white girl with short hair? Yeah, that's her. She's lovely.
I think I've met her.
She's super lovely.
In fact, I'm sure I've met her. Okay.
So I'm hearing that for our next step, community facilitator role coming from that idea of appreciative inquiry, and trying to tell the human story first, and giving the performers with really large air quotes, maybe it would be more appropriate to call them interpreters, storytellers, clearer parameters about how to approach their process and maybe the goals of the process.
What do you mean by telling them how to approach?
Maybe that's the wrong words. I think what I heard from Madison is that it was hard to know what direction to take with the material given.
I mean, that could just also be anything. I like structure. I don't know. But yeah, what I found, and what I think other people who especially aren't like going to art school or anything like that, I mean, we always get thrown into these situations where they're like, make a thing, use paper, go. And like,
right.
you have to do
Also,
it.
you have 10 minutes.
Yeah, basically, right?
Yes.
So like, I'm kind of trained to know how to deal with that and to know how to like kind of throw something together without many parameters. But I think for, and maybe this is like, I don't know, I might be completely wrong about this, but it might be helpful to have a little bit more structure and to have, or at least, if you're going to say, like, you can't talk to the person whose story this is, like a little bit of a reason or, like, an explanation as to, like, this is why we're thinking about doing this. You're the only person, just so you know. If you're having any, like, issues, talk to me. Not that I didn't, like, know that already, but,
to make it more explicit.
Well,
that's my own experience, though.
Well, I think that's interesting because, I think in conversations about objectives would clear up process a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's just what I mean. Like, it's not necessarily...
And you guys were discovering what you were making as you were making it. Really, you guys had no bloody idea.
Roz even said that, my friend who's sitting 2 people down, because I met her for brunch. And I was just talking about like how amazing this is, but didn't really give her any idea of what she was going to see, because I didn't know.
Yeah. So the thoughts that come to my head is very clear on what your objective is, but I'm hesitant about putting in format because part of your exploration is how does a storyteller tell
Yeah.
that story?
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be a diversity of techniques, and you know, if you're looking at, especially on the community level, there's no formal schools of thought. People are going to bring storytelling from their cultural perspective, from their own life experiences, whatever it is, and each one needs to be valid.
Sorry, I flashback to a community workshop I did.
Sorry.
That being said, though, I think I can't think of a situation currently where separating the performer completely from the story holder, is useful. But I do think unmitigated access to the story holder could be challenging. Does that make sense?
Challenging
Yeah.
why?
Someone who's not entirely comfortable as a performer or interpreter or something like that might crutch on the story holder as opposed to the facilitator,
Oh, okay.
right? And so some sort of facilitation around that interaction
Right.
as well. You know, not to control it, but to make sure it doesn't derail massively or
Right. So that they're always going and saying, is this choice okay? Is this choice okay? Is this choice
Yeah,
okay?
that would be an issue.
Asking to be sort of
Yeah, but
Validated.
Yeah, validated.
yeah, but some controlled conversations, yes, but I don't think it should be like, so you're going home with your brother, don't talk about the show.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and I think what we found, and Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong, but the sort of crux of this whole thing was conversation, and almost that we did a bit of a disservice to you, Madison, by not allowing you to be part of that conversation.
Thank you.
But
Sorry, but it was really difficult. It was
Yeah.
really, I don't know, maybe I just felt like left out, or I felt like I was being punished, or like, I don't know. Like, I had weird, like...
yeah, and you were sort of our guinea pig.
I know!
Yeah, but you didn't even tell her. That's the part that's
Kind of did.
Oh.
Not really.
Really?
I know. I'm sitting here thinking
Good for
we
you,
gave
buddy.
we gave an explanation, but
I
maybe
don't
we
think
didn't.
No, but
And I think that's
good for
the
you for
problem.
finding a support network. Because
Yes. Yeah, good for you.
But I think that Colleen and I, what I've realized is a problem with this project and with artists in general is that we sort of underexplain because we assume, because we've spent so much time
Yeah.
looking
at it.
conceptualizing it that we're like, well, it makes perfect sense
Well, and I was
in my brain. My brain is not your brain, but that's okay. I don't know that. Like,
But when did we have our first conversation? Like September or something?
yeah, something like that, mid-October. I don't even.
Yeah, I don't know. There is.
Oh, wow.
We'll just say it was October.
No, but like Lily and I had a
No,
conversation.
Denny,
like,
yeah, we started talking a while ago.
really, because she was like, "I'm taking this really crazy course, and let's have coffee."
Yeah.
So that's interesting too. Like I had a lot of privileged knowledge.
Right. And Dene shaped a lot of what this turned up being. Because we
I questioned your ideas. That's all I did.
Right, but that
Every
you were the
word.
first person I threw ideas against, and then Colleen and I sort of took it and ran with it. But you had a lot of say in sort of the direction that it took.
I wouldn't take ownership over the piece though. It's not mine. It's your guys'.
That's very sweet.
No, it's very real. I was just
It
devil's
sounds like
advocate
what
for
you're
a couple
saying
hours.
is you used him as a sounding board to pitch
Absolutely.
and help kind of refine your process and where you were going. And once you reached that stage, you two took it off.
Yeah.
And ran with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I guess just I think maybe my like feeling that there was a lack of structure in mine was just from not really knowing like why any of it was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
I was kind of like, so maybe it's not so much like the parameters surrounding like what the people are going to be doing, but just more communication
Yeah.
about